Well, my name's Tom Dixon. I was born in this house and I've lived here on and off ever since. And my connection on and off with licorice all my life. In fact, I'm like a stick of rock, whereas you stick of licorice. It's born right through me. You're at Beck House, Notting Road, Pontefract. The house, whose ground we're studying at the moment, was built in 1810 by my great-great-grandfather. It's the only house in Pontefract that's never been on the market. It's been passed down from one family through the generations, and now I've ended up with it. Well, as a kid, obviously, this was my playground where we stood now, and all these fields around us, which is acres and acres, was all licorice growing land. And the reason we can grow licorice down here, it's called the Wash Beck. And the reason it's called that is because of the depth of soil. There's 10 foot of sandy soil, which is perfect for licorice to grow, because licorice shouldn't be here. It's a Mediterranean plant, and that's why we call it a stick of Spanish. And the reason we call it Spanish is because it originated from Spain. And when Michael Patello came to film here for the Great British Train Journeys, he accused me of pinching it from his country because his original country was Spain. It's believed that it was brought over by the monks to Pontefract Castle, and they found the conditions absolutely perfect for growing it. The problem is, in Spain, they can grow it in 2 years, but down here, where we're stood now, it takes us 7 years. It's a root plant. It's just a root plant, and it's the roots that we dig up. And we never sold our licorice to the licorice works in Pontefract, and there was 18 at the turn of the century, but we sent all ours to Boots the chemist in Nottingham, and they used to boil it, press it. It came out in a big block, like a block of coal. They had flour, molasses, sugar and gelatine and a touch of aniseed. They put it all into a big pan with massive stirrers, and it stirs round, and it comes out then just like black dough, like your mother used to bake bread. And it's left to cool down, and the next day the girls turn it into licorice Allsorts, the sheets that go between the licorice Allsorts. They used to bake, they don't make them now, they used to make the licorice pipes, and the main thing was the Pontefract cake, where they used to stamp them and make them all by hand. 1810, when my great-great-grandfather built this house where we're stood now. And he built it specially on Notting Road so as he could cultivate all the land around to grow licorice. So they've been involved nearly 200 to 300 years. My uncle, who was the main man here, and my mother used to come and dig trenches, and they've got to dig at least 7 foot down to get all the licorice out. It was hard work, it was wet, and I never fancied it. They tried to get me to go into it from leaving school, but there's no way I was going to dig trenches for the rest of my life.
In terms of digging trenches, there's a good story about your uncle when he joined the army in the First World War, isn't there?
He left this house and he went to Leeds to sign on. And when he got to Leeds, they said, "What do you do for a living, lad?" He said, "I grow loads of licorice." A right dry Yorkshireman. They said, "Yes, but what's involved?" He said, "Well, I grow licorice." They said, "Yes, but how do you grow it?" He said, "I scratted my head for 5 minutes. I stood back and I said, I dig trenches." They looked at him and they said, "That's just the lad we're looking for." 1914 war. He went into the war. He served all his time in the war, where he got awarded the military medal, which is next to the Victoria Cross, and he never told a soul. He took that secret to his grave. He never told anybody he'd been awarded it. Not my mother, who was his only sister, or his wife. Everything in my day, because I started an apprenticeship at W.R. Wilkinson's, and in my day all the sweets were made by hand, but now it's all automation. There's no hand. We called them hand cakers, and you could always tell a girl when if she worked at the Liquorice works and she was what we call a caker, you could tell on a night they were all walking round town like this because they couldn't stop stamping. It were a disease, but it were hard work. Dunhills that burnt down in 1947, the biggest fire this town has ever seen, and it was owned by a family called Hillaby. And Hillaby's burnt down in 47. It was never rebuilt. And I got a phone call for a young man in Fleet in Hampshire. And he said, "Are you Mr. Dixon?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, I'm Mr. Hillaby's great-great-grandson." He says, "And did you know that we made a boot and we sent it to Hollywood when Charlie Chaplin was making the film The Gold Rush?" I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, my great-grandfather made this boot and sent it to Hollywood for the film The Gold Rush, because in The Gold Rush, Charlie Chaplin takes his boot off and he eats it because he's so hungry. Well, he couldn't eat a leather boot, could he? So this boot was made out of licorice at Pontefract, and I own that boot now. It ought to end up in Pontefract Museum, but I own it. And that boot has been all over this country and people are fascinated with it.
Do you think licorice will always have a home in Pontefract?
It's getting less. There's only Haribo now and W.R. Wilkinson's, which is now Tangerine. They're the only producers of licorice. The industry's dying because kids would rather have jelly sweets and stuff like that. It's lost its magic, to be quite honest, to what it used to be. But I get visitors to this house from Germany, Switzerland, all over the world, who are very fascinated by the story of licorice. I suppose my best memory is that I met my wife in the licorice factories, and we started going out. She married me, and now she's the boss.